Who is this artist? John Singer Sargent was born in Florence, Italy on January 12, 1856 to wealthy American parents. The family traveled as nomadic residents across Europe, seeing various cultures and attractions. Museums, historic landmarks, and other significant aspects of culture were of great importance to his mother, and she was determined to expose her family to it all. In addition, from an early age, John Singer Sargent was influenced by his mother's interest in art, since she had been an amateur painter herself. With his mother's encouragement and guidance, he began to develop his own artistic capabilities. When Sargent was 18 years old, his mother moved the family to Paris in 1874 to be at the center of the art world. The Impressionist movement was making inroads with the Parisian art world, and it influenced Sargent's style. He eventually came under the tutorship of portrait painter Carolus Duran, who used progressive painting instruction and bold painting techniques. John Singer Sargent became one of the most gifted portrait painters of his generation. Sargent was culturally sophisticated, witty, charming, multilingual, and well-read. These personality traits allowed him to relate to various modeling subjects, regardless of their background. Possessing a strong interest to learn about people, John Singer Sargent obtained an intimate feel for his sitters before painting them on canvas. Typically, he'd focus on the shapes and tones of the head before working in more detail with light and dark tones, almost replicating the technique of a sculpture on canvas. Sargent employed fluent and loose brushwork with his painting technique, which appeared remarkably integrated at a distance. Throughout his artwork, one can see that tonal values and true subject representations were very important. His remarkable talent for drawing with a brush was a hallmark of Sargent's great technical ability. John Singer Sargent passed away on April 15, 1925 at the age of 69 in London, England. That scandalous masterpiece, Portrait of Madame X. Portrait of Madame X is a rather large oil-on-canvas painting measuring 234.95 centimeters by 109.86 centimeters. The model was a New Orleans-born woman whose birth name was Virginie Amelie. She eventually came to Paris, where she married Pierre Gautreau, a prominent though older banker, and became Virginie Amelie Avegno Gautreau. Afterwards, she used her pleasing looks toward gaining status in Parisian high society. Madame Gautreau appears in a confident, almost arrogant pose. It took over a year for Sargent to complete this artwork, using a painting style which can be described as his unique form of contemporary realism. So, how did this portrait come into being? John Singer Sargent had painted the prominent French gynecologist Samuel John Posey in the artwork Dr. Posey at Home. Around this time, Dr. Posey was thought to have had relations with Madame Virginie Amelie Avegno Gautreau. Thus, Sargent first met her through the doctor's association with her. Madame Gautreau's constant desire for excitement, deep affection, and fame led her into various extramarital liaisons. In addition, she was the subject of numerous paintings because of her renowned beauty. After meeting Madame Gautreau, John Singer Sargent hoped to paint her to display at the forthcoming Paris Salon, which featured the best of French art. He hoped to capitalize on her looks and reputation to gain future commissions from other high society patrons. Madame Gautreau was constantly asked to be a model in paintings, and while she did pose, was very selective on accepting offers. She had refused numerous requests in the past to sit for a painting, which meant John Singer Sargent had no guarantee of success in his pursuit. However, he convinced her to pose for him in February 1883. Later, with constant distractions from her social calendar in Paris and the process stalled, Madame Gautreau invited Sargent to her large Brittany country estate in the month of June. Sargent began his preparatory work for the painting, which resulted in 30 drawings of various poses before finally choosing his preferred profile. Madame Gautreau was not the easiest model to paint. She was bored with the lengthy sitting sessions. Madame Gautreau's domestic responsibilities kept her constantly distracted, and the estate's daily responsibilities required even more attention. According to contemporary accounts, painting her was an excruciating challenge for Sargent. At that time, he is quoted as saying, "the unpaintable beauty and hopeless laziness of Madame Gautreau," though she too was unnerved by the artist and his methods, including taking too long with his process. John Singer Sargent, the great portrait painter, completed the iconic artwork Portrait of Madame X in 1884 AD. Wearing a simple yet elegant evening gown, Madame Gautreau strikes a modern pose which highlights her proportions and figure. She leans her right hand for support on a round table, whose legs are shaped towards the top like winged sirens from Greek mythology. Her head is turned sideways to the viewer, yet there is a forward-looking energy in her figure. On further examination, one notes the pale, almost porcelain tone of her skin. Madame Gautreau's translucent tone is further highlighted by lavender-tinted powder, though her ear reminds us of the natural flesh tone underneath this powder. The black velvet bodice of this dress with jeweled shoulder straps has an elegant, modern simplicity which complements her proportions. In her left hand, one can just spot a black fan which is almost camouflaged by her satin skirt, which makes the faint brightness of her wedding ring easier to detect. There is an erotic suggestion in her pose along with dignity, hinting at status in privileged society. Madame Gautreau is adorned with a classic Greek hairstyle topped by a very small crescent moon tiara. It depicts the Roman goddess of the hunt, Diana. The initial version of this painting, presented at the Paris Salon, showed a bejeweled strap on the right shoulder as loosely hanging on her arm, which would become a vital issue when the painting was exhibited. Interestingly, Sargent did not identify his model in the title of his painting, calling it Portrait de Madame ... John Singer Sargent exhibited Portrait of Madame X at the Paris Salon of 1884. At this time, the Paris Salon held the virtues of Victorian social standards and conservatism. In 1878, he exhibited 2 paintings at the Paris Salon and was a great success. So, this was a highly anticipated exhibition of his latest creation. At the same time, he created Portrait of Madame X knowing his painting needed something unique to stand out among thousands of other paintings on exhibit. Unfortunately, once Portrait of Madame X was displayed at the Paris Salon of 1884, 2 things happened. Madame Gautreau was widely recognized as the model, despite his attempt to conceal her identity. Secondly, and more important, numerous contemporary accounts note the painting met strong anger, outrage, and negative criticisms. Damaging professional reviews of this highly regarded painter's artwork soon followed in newspapers. Some called Portrait of Madame X unattractive mainly because of the pale skin tone, while others strongly objected to the erotic inferences of the pose and loose dress strap. One has to remember that the social climate of Parisian upper-class society at that time had a more formal, conformist attitude. Therefore, many deemed Madame Gautreau's revealing neckline plunge vulgar and translucent skin tone far too pale. Though extremely harsh critiques did not stop there. Various other viewers of the painting suggested this artwork was a public display of immoral behavior, reflecting the reputed loose morals of Madame Gautreau. Putting the amorous reputation of the model in full view for all to see was not considered proper for polite society. Even though their own private love affairs were a common practice, to have an American display this discreet convention was too shameful for their practiced hypocrisies. Unflattering reviews of this artwork were followed by satires and ridicule. It should be noted that a few positive observers commented on how future viewers may see this painting as one interpretation of contemporary Parisian cosmopolitan lifestyle. Nevertheless, both painter and model were deeply distressed by the overwhelmingly severe criticisms. Soon after, the status-conscious mother of Madame Gautreau wrote John Singer Sargent, pleading for him to withdraw the painting from public view because it ruined her family's reputation. As a compromise, the shoulder strap was overpainted into its natural position, though not in time to save either the painting or its model's reputation. As a result of this painting, even though she remained in France, Virginie Gautreau was ostracized from her higher-ranking social circle for quite a while. Eventually, as time progressed, Madame Gautreau turned this attention in her favor as people want to see the person behind the scandal. Meanwhile, she and her husband became even more estranged. Madame Virginie Amelie Avegno Gautreau passed away on July 25, 1915 in Cannes, France, age 56. Where is Portrait of Madame X today? As for Portrait of Madame X, John Singer Sargent kept it in his Paris studio. After the Paris Salon exhibition, his French commissions disappeared and he became socially ostracized. Portrait of Madame X remained in his possession when he relocated his studio to London. Soon after, Sargent's career had a rebirth, and he became successful both there and in America. From 1905 onwards, the painting was shown in a few international exhibitions. Eventually, John Singer Sargent sold Portrait of Madame X to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 1916 with the stipulation not to use the lady's true name. In addition, he changed the painting's name to Madame X. Why is Portrait of Madame X significant? Portrait of Madame X is significant for a number of reasons. This masterpiece painting was held in high disdain at its initial public appearance. Though as time progressed and the art world's response changed to a more favorable view, it is currently regarded by many as a masterpiece painting. Therefore, this artwork is a classic example of how changing tastes can discover the mastery behind paintings that were perhaps too advanced for conventional understanding when first publicly introduced. In the year 1960, even a dress based on that worn in this painting was shown on Dina Merrill in a published Life magazine photo. Criticisms and reviews of Portrait of Madame X offer an intriguing look into social norms and attitudes at that time. It seemed women were more forceful with their negative opinions on Portrait of Madame X, possibly to give a strong appearance of moral righteousness. Curiously, their strong distaste for Portrait of Madame X came despite the fact there were various nude paintings at the Paris Salon of 1884. This indicates the status of Madame Gautreau as a married society woman posing for such a painting had to be punished with strict social condemnation and displays of outright anger. In the end, John Singer Sargent thought it was the best painting he had ever made, and it is currently his most popular painting. Thank you for supporting us at Victorian to Modern. Be sure to watch our next episode from the Victorian Art Gallery or any other fascinating video from our Victorian to Modern channel. Also, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, click the notification bell, and share this channel so we can create more exciting content. I wish you good tidings as we remember that sharing knowledge has been a noble deed throughout the ages.